Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Group B's case presentation about transaction cost theory applied to Uber. So today we will talk about transaction cost theory, a short history of it. Then we will give you the modern day view of transaction cost theory. We will also give you a short introduction about Uber, and then we will move on to bounded reliability and Uber, asset specificity in Uber, uncertainty in Uber, frequency in Uber, and at the very end, the conclusions. So, the history of transactional cost theory. It has its roots in 1931 when John R. Cummins said, he introduced the idea. He said that transactions intervene between the labor of classic economists and the pleasure of hedonic economists. And with this, he basically meant that transactions are not an exchange of commodities, but rather the alienation and acquisition of the rights of property and liberty created by society, which must therefore be negotiated between the involved parties before the laborers can produce, the consumers can consume, and commodities can be exchanged. So he basically thought of transactions as more of a contract than just a trade of commodities. However, since 1931, this theory obviously has evolved, and this is mostly thanks to Oliver E. Williamson, who introduced the idea that transaction costs are not just related to buying and selling, but it also includes the emotions that are coming with this trade, any other exchanges, any cultural differences, and many, many more factors. So that he said that transaction costs are not just the buying and the selling, but everything that has to do with operating in a specific market. And therefore he made 5 specific points, determinants, which have a significant influence on transaction costs. And these 5 are frequency, specificity, uncertainty, limited rationality, and opportunistic behavior. Now, the rationality, the limited rationality or bounded rationality, and the opportunistic behavior or opportunism can sometimes be bound together due to them being very similar as long as the market is within a certain state. And this was also the case with Uber. Now, frequency is very easy to describe. It's just how many times something specific is used. Obviously, specificity we will come to later when we describe it. And uncertainty is just the state of the market. Okay, so we will move on to Uber. It is a American multinational company, and it was founded in March 2009. It has a headquarters in San Francisco, California, in the United States, obviously. And it is in 2020 active in 900 metropolitan areas worldwide. These are like the big city areas. It also has a 67% market share for ride sharing and a 24% market percentage share of the food delivery. This is only in the US, this specific percentage, but we will be focusing on ride sharing. It has a total of 3.9 million drivers listed worldwide, and it makes about 14 million trips per day. However, even though it might seem like a very healthy company, it still made a loss of $8.4 billion last year in 2019. Okay, let's continue. The bounded reliability and Uber. Bounded reliability in the ride-sharing market is all about reputation. Of course, it's all about reputation except when there is no competition, because then it doesn't matter what your reputation is. There is no one who you can go to otherwise. However, with Uber and Uber's market, there is a very high competition. It not only has direct competitors, as you can see, like Lyft or Grabs, but it also has other kinds of competition. And these are, for example, public transport, or just people owning cars, or even, especially here in the Netherlands, bikes. This means that for Uber, there's a very high bounded reliability, and unfortunately for Uber, this also means higher transaction costs, because it now has to fix any mistakes that it made to keep its reputation up. So now we will continue with asset specificity in Uber. High asset specificity implies that you have a high amount of internal transactions. For Uber, this is not the case, because Uber has not actually contracted their own drivers. They are outsourced. They are freelancers who drive people around and just get money through the Uber app. They don't actually have a contract with Uber itself, and this means that that Uber has a very high external transaction costs. So in general, you can say that Uber has very low asset specificity. Then uncertainty in Uber. The uncertainty in Uber mostly consists of both its business model and the factors within the business model. And luckily for Uber, the ride-sharing business is fairly straightforward. So this creates a low uncertainty within the company. The only uncertainties that can still be created are from the drivers and how customers experience the drivers and the rides themselves. However, this has a very small impact on the business in and of itself with an uncertainty. So the uncertainty within Uber is so low that it reduces the contracting costs, which in turn implies that the transaction costs fall, and this makes the case for outsourcing the drivers when Uber needs to be more cost friendly. So looking at the frequency in Uber, especially the frequency in all of the company, in all of Uber, it would make sense for Uber to internalize its driver service, since most taxi companies would only dream of making 14 million trips a day. However, when you actually look at the how spread out this is, the frequency is spread out over 80 countries and over 900 different metropolitan areas, over 3.9 million drivers even. So at the end, it makes a total number of 3.5 rides per driver per day. And this is far too few for Uber to even justify internalizing their driver fleet, because it would imply that not enough costs can be spread. To conclude all of this, the theoretical application to Uber and their driving share services, it makes good sense for Uber to outsource their driver fleet. Through not having their drivers directly under contract, the company was able to reduce their transaction costs to a minimum, decreasing the losses that Uber is actually making. However, with an eye on the social debates that this approach has given rise to, Uber is still growing their business, growing the quality of their business, and making sure that it doesn't make any unnecessary costs. So as long as the business model and the environment will stay the same, if Uber keeps on applying the transaction cost theory, it should be able to keep growing and has the potential to become a very healthy and a successful business. Thank you all for listening, and see you next week.